initially we shall be doing some concept building and talking about a thing called as surfactant. What exactly is a surfactant? It is a mixture of phospholipids, proteins, cholesterol and other lipid substances which is secreted by type 2 alveolar epithelial cells. To elaborate a bit more, let us try to understand what is the histology of a normal alveolus. If I have to show you in diagrammatic form, this is how an alveolus looks like. So, as you can see, in the interstitium you have fibroblast cells, this is the capillary and this whole structure is the alveolus. Right? If you see that there are two types of cells you can find. One are the majority of cells which are squamous shaped. They are called as type 1 alveolar epithelial cells. They are involved in gas exchange. The second are these stocky cells which have interdigitating processes or cellular projections. They are called as type 2 pneumocytes and they are the cells which produce surfactant. So, you may get a labeled photographs like this and they may ask you which among the following cells secrete surfactant. So, what you will remember, there are two types of cells in the alveoli. Type 1 pneumocytes. Pneumocytes are also called as alveolar epithelial cells. They are squamous and extremely thin, as you can see here. They cover almost 95% of the alveolar surface and they are the ones which are involved in gas exchange. The second ones are granular and roughly cuboidal and they have these interdigitations. They cover around 5% of the alveolar surface and they are the ones which secrete pulmonary surfactant. Surfactant is released by which cells was the NEET PG question 1 year back. So, you can add first point to your notes. So, let us begin. What is surfactant? Surfactant is a mixture of phospholipids, proteins and cholesterol. It is produced by type 2 pneumocytes or type 2 alveolar epithelial cells. What is the composition of surfactant? The most important component, which comprises 50 to 65% of the total content, is lecithin. Lecithin, the chemical name interchangeably used is DPPC. DPPC stands for dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline. Other substances which are present, they include phosphatidyl glycerol, cholesterol and proteins. There are 4 types of proteins which are present in surfactant. They include SPA, SPB, SPC and SPD. And among them, SPB is one of the most important protein present in surfactant. So, this is the overall thing regarding the surfactant. Now, obviously the question arises, what is the function of surfactant? Why do we need it? To understand this, think of physics. There is a law known as Laplace law. This is something you might have read in your physics when you were in +1 or +2. Laplace law says the implication is whenever there is a air-filled structure or there is a air-fluid interface which is filled with air from the inside, it will always acquire a globular shape. And in this globular shape, a force is generated on the surface which acts inwards and tries to collapse this air-filled structure. This force is called as surface tension. To give you an example, suppose water has collected somewhere, right? You throw a pebble into it. A bubble is formed. What is a bubble? A bubble has air inside, right? As soon as a bubble is formed, a force is generated which acts inwards and collapses the bubble. So, this is an example of surface tension causing collapse of the air-filled structure. Think of another example. You go to a beach, you go to a mall. Children are playing with soap water. They blow soap bubble. That is a stable bubble. It goes on floating until it strikes a surface. So, that is also air-fluid interface. What is the difference between the two bubbles? Why one bubble is unstable and another bubble is stable? This is because the second bubble is having soap in that. Anything which has detergent-like action opposes surface tension and stabilizes that interface. Now think of alveoli. This is how an alveolus looks like. Nature knows that when a child is fetus, the lungs are not taking part in gas exchange, the alveoli are collapsed. When the child will be born, the alveolus will expand, air will move inside, and as soon as air moves inside, surface tension will be generated which will try to collapse this air-filled structure. This is physics law. Nature knows this is going to happen. So what nature does? It produces its own detergent-like substance, and that detergent-like substance is surfactant. Surfactant released by type 2 pneumocytes before birth in a term child lines the inside of this alveolus and opposes surface tension. So what is the purpose of surfactant? Surfactant opposes surface tension in the alveoli. So it decreases the surface tension in the alveoli. Any absence of surfactant will lead to collapse of the alveoli due to unopposed surface tension, and that is the disease that is the condition which produces a disease called as hyaline membrane disease. That is the function which surfactant performs. There are a few one-liners regarding sequence of surfactant production that we need to remember. First of all, when does the production begin? The production of surfactant begins at 20 weeks of gestation. Direct line given in Nelson. It is stored in type 2 cells as what form? Those forms are called as lamellar bodies. It is detected in amniotic fluid. That is, it starts reaching the lumen of the alveoli at what age onwards? 28 week onwards. So 28 week of gestation onwards. Amount necessary to prevent HMD is attained at what age? 33 to 34 weeks. So all children who develop HMD are usually found to be less than this gestational age. And finally, mature levels of surfactant are attained at what age? They attained at 35 week onwards. And right now, as I am speaking and you are listening, surfactant is being produced in us continuously. So this point and this point have already been asked as one-liners in your MCQ entrance exam. So with this background in mind, we'll be discussing HMD topic in details. Before that, there are a few MCQ pearls that we need to remember. So what are the MCQ pearls? In MCQ Pearl, we'll be talking about the test for fetal lung maturity, which are performed on amniotic fluid. So if the mother is pregnant and she has preterm labor, we are interested in knowing whether the baby's lungs are mature or not. When we say lungs are mature, we are talking about surfactant is there or not. So what are the tests we perform? The most commonly done test is lecithin sphingomyelin ratio, LS ratio. So this is the most commonly done test. We take amniotic fluid, check the lecithin content, check the sphingomyelin content and take the ratio of that. If the ratio is more than 2:1, it indicates that the lung is mature. So it indicates maturity of the lung. However, there is a caveat here. This LS ratio can be affected by multiple conditions, including contamination of blood, and sometimes false values can be produced in infant of diabetic mother. So if question says infant of diabetic mother is there, mother has diabetes, what cutoff of LS ratio will indicate lung maturity? In IDM, ratio more than 3.5:1 indicates a mature lung. So these are the 2 points you need to remember for MCQ entrance exam. The second test is phosphatidylglycerol estimation. This is a bit costly test, but it is considered to be more sensitive than LS ratio, and it is better suited in gestational diabetes mellitus. So phosphatidylglycerol estimation is a more sensitive test. Third, we do a lamellar body count in amniotic fluid. Lamellar body count says that if the total lamellar bodies are more than 50,000 per microliter, it indicates lung maturity. So this is the value that you need to remember. Fourth, we perform a test known as surfactant albumin ratio. Different gestational ages have different ratio cutoffs, but it is an outdated test, useful only in research practice, not that commonly performed. And fifth is the one which is called as shake test. Shake test can be done on the bedside as well. If you have amniotic fluid, or sometimes if the child is just born, you can even take, the child must have aspirated some amniotic fluid into the, must have ingested something into the airway, into the gut. So you will take out that amniotic fluid, or you can simply take the sample from the mother's amniotic fluid. We take amniotic fluid and mix it with equal amount of ethyl alcohol, ethanol, in a test tube. Then we shake it vigorously and see what is happening. If there is a stable, complete layer of bubbles getting formed, that indicates that surfactant is there, it is stabilizing the bubbles, and so lung is mature. It is a rough way which is sometimes used in peripheral setting. And if there are no bubbles getting formed, or bubbles form and they collapse, then we say the lung is immature. Immature lung means the surfactant is relatively deficient. So shake test is useful to predict the occurrence of HMD, and it is a useful bedside test which does not require any sophisticated laboratory equipment. So these are the 5 important tests for fetal lung maturity. They are asked in OBS Gynae. They are also sometimes asked as a part of pediatric integrated MCQs. With this MCQ pearl in mind, let us begin the discussion of the disease, the important disease, hyaline membrane disease. So the disease is HMD. It is also called as respiratory distress syndrome. The preferred term is respiratory distress syndrome, but the older term is HMD. Why did the term HMD came into being? 1950s and 60s, scientists found that there are certain young children who are born prematurely. You give oxygen, you do whatever, the child will die. When the autopsy was done, they would find a hyaline membrane composed of fibrin in the lung alveoli, and so the name was called as HMD. Later on, when it came to mind, when it was researched, it was found that surfactant deficiency produces the disease, and so the name was changed to RDS. But older names tend to stick around, and so HMD and RDS are synonymously used. So HMD, what is the first thing that you need to remember? It is the most common cause of respiratory distress in preterm babies less than 35 weeks. So less than 35 weeks, most common cause of respiratory distress is HMD. What is the cause of HMD? It is deficiency of surfactant. What happens due to deficiency of surfactant? It produces progressive alveolar collapse, which causes 2 things. It causes ventilation perfusion mismatch. Perfusion is normal, but ventilation is not happening, alveolus has collapsed, and it will also produce local fibrin exudate. This will cause the formation of hyaline membrane, and this ventilation perfusion mismatch will cause progressive respiratory failure. The combination of these two is called as hyaline membrane disease. What are the risk factors? The most important risk factor for HMD is prematurity. More preterm the baby is, higher is the risk of HMD. So this is an MCQ point. Other risk factors which increase the risk of HMD, they include infant of diabetic mother, asphyxia, twin pregnancy, and coexisting malformations, which can include conditions like congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So these are the risk factors for HMD. Let us move towards the clinical features. The clinical picture is very simple. There is a preterm child who is less than 35 weeks. After birth, the child will develop respiratory distress. The onset of respiratory distress will be within 6 hours of birth. and it shows a very peculiar pattern, very characteristic pattern. First, the child will develop, first few hours, the child will develop tachypnea, that is rapid respiratory rate. Later on, the child will also develop retractions, that is indrawing of the chest wall. After some time, if nothing has happened, as disease progresses, the child will also develop expiratory grunting also. And if still nothing is done, the full-blown respiratory distress has come, you are only giving oxygen or not managing properly, the child will develop cyanosis and shock, that is multi-organ dysfunction will develop. Ultimately, death can also develop in the child. HMD is considered to be a clinical diagnosis. However, chest X-ray is useful in ruling out similar conditions. So what are the chest X-ray findings you find in HMD? In very early stages, that is first 2 to 3 hours, the chest X-ray may even be normal. Later, after beyond 2 to 3 hours, you will find some specific findings. The first finding which is important is air bronchogram. Air columns in the tracheobronchial tree, they appear as linear black shadows against a white background. The white background is because of collapse of alveoli. The trachea and the bronchial tree, bronchial branches, they do not collapse, and so the air in them will become visible. That sign is called as air bronchogram sign. Very important clue. Secondly, these children will develop reticulonodular pattern. Some children develop ground glass appearance. And finally, advanced cases, the chest X-ray will show a dangerous sign called as white out lung. White out lung is a poor prognostic sign. Most alveoli have collapsed and the bilateral lung shadows appear totally white. That is white out lung. So these are the chest X-ray findings. You may get visuals on the chest X-rays. So there are two visuals that are important for your exam. One is air bronchogram sign and second is white out lung. Let us see how they look like. So look at this picture. In this picture, this is a HMD child. Can you see that the tracheobronchial tree, the bronchial markings are visible? Can you see it? This, all these are branches of the bronchus where the air columns are visible against a white background. This is called as the air bronchogram sign. Right? And then white out lung look like. Let us try to see here. This is a white out lung. Can you see almost the entire lung has collapsed and no air, almost no air can be found. Very high mortality, very high ventilatory requirements. So this is an appearance of a white out lung. Now moving over to the treatment part. How do we manage these children? Now treatment is very complicated. What I am writing here is the tip of iceberg, but it is written in a manner that you are able to retain and understand it, and it is taken from combination of AIMS protocol, Nelson 21st edition, OP Ghai, and what we pediatricians, neonatologists normally do. So treatment wise, the first thing that we do is the initial part. So initial disease, that is the patient is just diagnosed or presents initially. In initial disease, there is no grunting and no retractions, right? These patients of HMD, you need to start them on, the first step to do is start the patient on warm humidified oxygen. Warm humidified oxygen with a concentration that is FiO2 of 40 to 70%. Room air has 21%, right? FiO2 is fraction of inspired oxygen. So FiO2, that is concentration that you start is 40 to 70%. And when we start it, the target should be that the arterial SpO2 saturation of the child should be between 91 to 95%. We don't target 100% because if you give high oxygen concentration, it will cause retinopathy. All these are preterm child. So target SpO2 is 91 to 95%. The thing to remember here is oxygen alone is not effective in HMD if it is severe. For example, if grunting is present. So if grunting is present, then oxygen alone is not effective. So what we will do? So then second step, If there is HMD associated with grunting or SpO2 in HMD is less than 90% despite oxygen. In these patients, we will start the patient on nasal CPAP. Nasal CPAP. CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure. It can be given through ventilator, but it is not exactly ventilation. We are basically applying nasal prong and giving positive pressure into the airway to keep the alveoli open. How much pressure we give? The pressure given is in the range of 5 to 8 centimeter of saline. And CPAP can even be used prophylactically also. Nelson says, very preterm child, 26 week, 27 week, you can start CPAP even prophylactically in children less than 28 weeks. CPAP is a very effective therapy, and in well-established HMD, we don't even give oxygen. The direct step we start is CPAP. So if your MCQ says that the child of HMD is having grunting, word grunting is mentioned, and oxygen is there in the option, you will not give. The first step to give is CPAP. Even and any established HMD, the effective therapy to give is again CPAP. So CPAP stabilizes the child, improves oxygenation, prevents the collapse of the alveoli. The third thing, if the SpO2 is still less than 90% despite CPAP, that is an indication to consider surfactant administration. Surfactant administration. What was the reason for HMD? Surfactant was not there. So if you give surfactant, patient will get cured. It is a costly therapy. It cannot be given Sida. You need to stabilize the airway, ensure oxygenation by oxygen or CPAP, and then you give surfactant, right? But surfactant is considered to be the therapy of choice. So if MCQ simply asks you, what is the therapy of choice in HMD? Therapy of choice will be replace the reason why HMD happened, that is surfactant administration. And then we have fourth strategy, that is ventilation, also called as mechanical ventilation. Ventilation is needed if there is pH less than 7.20 in the blood, or if the PaCO2, carbon dioxide pressure in arterial blood, is equal to or more than 60 millimeters of mercury, or if there is no improvement despite above management, or if there is persistent apnea. If any of these four indications is fulfilled, we start the patient on ventilator. So initially, how do we ventilate the children? Initially, we start with IPPV, intermittent positive pressure ventilation. The mode is SIMV. SIMV stands for synchronized intermittent mechanical ventilation. And if IPPV fails, we move towards the last step in the management, that is HFOV. HFOV stands for high frequency oscillometric ventilation. It is an advanced form of ventilation which is useful in advanced cases of pulmonary failure. So these are the four steps of management of HMD and the corresponding indication, the things you need to remember. It looks a bit daunting, but trust me, this is all you need to know for any level of entrance exam which you will be giving before you start your PG life. And they will also, the nuggets which I have added are the ones which have already been asked or will be useful to rule out other options when you practice difficult MCQ. So this is regarding the management part. Now there is a small little thing that you need to remember, that it is not commonly done, but if the question says that child is of HMD, this was a MCQ scenario, is on HFOV, right? But not yet improving. Can you try any modality? Theoretically, yes. we can do a modality, we can perform a modality which is called as ECMO. ECMO stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. In short, it is also written as heart-lung machine. Just like dialysis is an external device which removes nitrogenous substances, similarly, if both lungs are not performing their function, you take out venous blood, oxygenate externally and then pump back into the arterial system. That is called as ECMO. Any neonate who requires ECMO has a very high mortality. So, this is more of theoretical thing than practical. But if the question asks that despite this you can do, then ECMO. If ECMO is not working, then probably fate is not favoring this child anymore. So after this, there are a few points related to surfactant therapy that you need to remember. So let us discuss a few points related to surfactant therapy, because it is a hot new thing. How many doses of surfactant do you require? You require 2 doses of surfactant, 12 to 24 hours apart, with second dose being optional. Like most of the children, they require only 1 dose. Second dose is optional. Amount of dose will not asked. It depends upon the concentration and brand. And branded things are not asked in entrance exam. Surfactant is of 2 types. You have the natural surfactant, which are derived from either bovine, buffalo fetus, or porcine, that is pig fetus. And second is the artificial surfactant. Artificial surfactant comes by the name of surfaxin or surfaxamine, which is found to be superior. Natural ones are found to be superior than artificial surfactants. What is the side effect? If you give extra surfactant more than what is needed, the child can develop pulmonary hemorrhage. What is the technique to give surfactant? The technique to give surfactant is known as INSURE technique. INSURE stands for, IN stands for intubate, SUR stands for you give surfactant, and E stands for extubate. So what we do in INSURE technique is, first in sterile setting, you shift the child to ICU. The child is already on CPAP, right? After that, you will remove oxygen and CPAP from the child. Then you will intubate the child. You will put an endotracheal tube in the airway. Through that endotracheal tube, you will put another small tube inside that tube. So tube inside tube. In the inner tube, you will give surfactant bolus and then take out both the tubes. This is called as INSURE technique. Intubate, small tube, give surfactant, take out both the tubes. That is called as INSURE technique. Has a problem that it requires tube within tube, and so intubation is mandatory. You need to be very good with your skills of intubation. Certain preterm children are not prone to it. So a modification of INSURE has been devised, which is now found to be superior. That modification of INSURE technique is called as MIST technique, also called as LISA technique. MIST stands for minimally invasive surfactant administration, whereas LISA stands for less invasive surfactant administration. Among them, the difference is that MIST and LISA are not dependent upon endotracheal intubation. Here, a small nasogastric tube is used to give surfactant. And so, even if the doctor is not competent, or if the doctor is not confident of intubating, so you can still do it by MIST or LISA. Wherever possible, if question says which is the preferred technique these days, the answer is MIST or LISA. But if the question says what is the gold standard, it is INSURE technique, which is still used in many medical colleges. And then 2 terms related to surfactant are asked. What is prophylactic surfactant? Prophylactic surfactant is given in children less than 28 weeks before distress begins. We know that these children are going to develop HMD. Surfactant is not there in sufficient amount. So we give prophylactic, that is known as prophylactic surfactant. And second thing is early rescue surfactant. Early rescue surfactant is given within 2 hours of onset of respiratory distress, once it has started, and it is given if the patient is requiring CPAP or mechanical ventilation in higher settings. So you don't wait for further higher settings to be done. If the patient is already on CPAP with high FiO2 requirement or on ventilation already, then you need to give early rescue therapy within 2 hours. The third variety is late rescue, which is given beyond 2 hours. It is considered to be the most inferior way. But rather than not giving at all, late rescue can also be done in selected settings. So this is regarding the surfactant therapy, the things which are mentioned in protocols and you need to understand. Next, we move to the prophylaxis or prevention of HMD. Prevention of HMD can be done by maternal steroid therapy. Studies have shown that steroids increase surfactant production. So if you give corticosteroid to mother, they will pass to the baby whose mother is in labor and they will increase surfactant production, ensuring the maturity of the lung is attained rapidly. So maternal steroid therapy can prevent HMD. Who are the candidate mothers? The candidate mothers are pregnant females with preterm onset of labor between 24 to 34 weeks of gestation. Beyond 34 weeks, surfactant already there. Less than 24 weeks, patient anyways not compatible with life, so we don't give it. And what is the agent of choice? It has been asked 3 times in MCQ entrance exam. Agent of choice is dexamethasone. Even the dose is asked in entrance exam. AIIMS MCQ, they once asked the dose. 6 milligram intramuscular, 4 doses, 12 hours apart each. That is the dose of dexamethasone. If they ask you what is the alternative one, the alternative to this is betamethasone. The dose of betamethasone is 12 milligram intramuscular, 2 doses, 24 hours apart each. And it's not that you give steroid injection and the baby is born in 10 minutes, he will be fine. It requires some latent time, like 12 to 24 hours it needs for this steroid to act on the baby's lungs and produce surfactant. And what is the contraindication for giving maternal steroid therapy? The contraindication is established chorioamnionitis. If the mother is already having chorioamnionitis, then you do not give maternal steroid therapy. There is an important differential diagnosis of HMD that you need to remember. A disease which resembles HMD but it is not HMD. The DD of HMD is neonatal PAP. PAP stands for primary alveolar proteinosis. Neonatal PAP is a autosomal recessive condition. So it shows autosomal recessive inheritance in which there is deficiency of SPB protein in the surfactant. What is the role of SPB? SPB has multiple roles. One of the role is, there are 2 major roles that you need to know. One role is cycling or circulation of the surfactant. So older surfactant whose composition has changed needs to be removed and new surfactant needs to come. That is also mediated by SPB protein. Secondly, SPB protein is involved in ensuring that a proper layer is formed around the alveolus. These 2 are very important functions. Now imagine SPB protein is deficient or not there. So what will happen? The cycling of the surfactant will be impaired and all surfactant, instead of lining the alveoli, will form coarse clumps and remain in the center of alveolar lumen. So what will happen? Alveolus will collapse. Surfactant is there, but it is not forming layer, so it will collapse and so it will produce a HMD-like illness. So you can write, this deficiency of SPB protein causes absence of monolayer formation of surfactant in the alveoli. And so it manifests as HMD-like illness. There is a history of sibling deaths, and the disease can occur even in term babies. These patients show no response or poor response to surfactant. Because the animal surfactant, the natural surfactant which is there, it has very low levels of SBB protein. They are not sufficient to replace the SBB proteins which are there. It is naturally low in SBB protein. In a child when of HMD, when you give that, the child's type 2 pneumocytes are active. They in some way tend to compensate by releasing some SBB protein into that, and so that functions fine here. The exogenous surfactant that we use in these patients is not found to be effective. When you do lung biopsy in these patients, you find a PAS positive material present in the alveolar lumen. This is precipitated surfactant remnants which you find, and the only treatment in these children is lung transplant. So very poor prognosis is there in these patients. There is another condition known as primary alveolar proteinosis seen in adult. That is different condition. It has got nothing to do with it. So if you get a MCQ where the question says child had features of tachypnea, retraction, grunting soon after birth, but it was a term child and the patient had 2 sibling deaths in the family, you will not think of HMD. These keywords will make you think neonatal PAP as the likely answer. So this finishes the complete discussion of HMD as the topic. Now we move towards some of the smaller topics. One of the smaller topic is meconium aspiration syndrome or MAS. What is meconium? Meconium refers to the first stool of the newborn. Right? Normally meconium is passed 24 hours after birth. If meconium is passed in utero, it can be aspirated by the child, and that condition is called as meconium aspiration syndrome. Aspiration is something moving into the airway. When meconium aspiration happens, there are 2 pathophysiological processes which are implicated in producing the disease. First process is called as obstructive emphysema. What is obstructive emphysema? The thick meconium, every meconium will have some solid part and some semi-solid liquid part, right? The solid part will get stuck up in the upper airway, in the main bronchus or in the one of the bronchial branches. It will act as a ball valve. It will allow air to move inside during inspiration but will trap air during expiration. So the lung will go on expanding. That is called as obstructive emphysema. So you can write a thick meconium plug. Thick meconium plug traps air in the lungs, producing obstructive emphysema. The second process involved in meconium aspiration syndrome is that thin component, semi-solid, that will trickle down, reach the alveoli and cause intense inflammation. We call it as chemical pneumonitis. So the clinical manifestations of meconium aspiration syndrome arise due to both obstructive emphysema and chemical pneumonitis. So clinical features, the child will have features like history of meconium stained liquor will be there, followed by onset of respiratory distress, tachypnea, retraction and grunting. But the respiratory distress onset is usually around 5 to 6 hours and beyond. It does not manifest early in the first 6 hours as you see in patients with HMD. So books say 5 to 6 hours, practically it is a cause of distress, 90% cases beyond 6 hours of life. When you do chest X-ray, you will find 3 things. Due to air trapping, obstructive emphysema, the lung will be overexpanded, so hyperinflation of the lung will be seen. Due to chemical pneumonitis, you will find patchy infiltrates. And if nothing else is done, sometimes there will be collapse or atelectasis of some segments. Atelectasis or collapse will happen. There are 2 complications of meconium aspiration syndrome. The most common complication is pneumothorax. And the second complication is a dreaded disease called as PPHN, persistent pulmonary hypertension in neonate or in newborn. It is a condition where very high pulmonary pressures are seen and response to oxygen therapy is very less. What is the management of meconium aspiration syndrome? It is conservative in most patients. Studies have shown that the role of prophylactic IV antibiotics is not there, but if you suspect secondary infection and there is a evidence of that, then only you will start IV antibiotics. So conservative management will include oxygen, CPAP and ventilation if they are needed, along with IV fluids. You will not feed the child any breastfeeding. And some studies have shown that inhaled nitric oxide is useful in patients with PPHN. So inhaled nitric oxide can be used if patient develops PPHN. This finishes the summary of persistent meconium aspiration syndrome. Now quickly we move towards the next disease, that is bronchopulmonary dysplasia. In short, it is written as BPD. The old name of this condition is chronic lung disease of newborn. Chronic lung disease of newborns. This is the older name, CLD of newborns. What is the age group in which it is seen? It is seen in babies born at less than 32 weeks of gestation, and it is characterized by requirement for additional oxygen for 28 days or longer. These are the two important things that you need to remember. There are certain children who are born prematurely, less than 28 weeks. They develop HMD or you prevent HMD by giving surfactant, but later on it is found that due to some reason they are put on oxygen and you cannot taper off oxygen. And if that child remains on oxygen continuously for 28 days, we say clinically the child has developed bronchopulmonary dysplasia. What is the reason? Why does the disease develop? As more and more premature children are being saved by HMD, the incidence of BPD is rising. There are three main reasons which are implicated in producing bronchopulmonary dysplasia. First of all, any condition which produces alveolar collapse starts fibrosis and inflammation in the lungs. This is called as atelic trauma. Second reason is when you give mechanical ventilation, you are treating HMD, you gave mechanical ventilation. Mechanical ventilation produced over-distension of the lungs. This over-distension produces another trauma called as volutrauma. More volume of air in the lungs than it is required. And third, you are giving high concentration of oxygen, right? So high oxygen concentration is being given. This high oxygen concentration will produce more free radicals, and that will cause free radical injury. The combination of these three factors, atelic trauma, volutrauma and free radical injury produces significant changes in the structure and function of epithelial lining of the airways, producing bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Now, what are the types of bronchopulmonary dysplasia? First, you need to understand that when you say types, it is always assessed at 36 weeks of post-menstrual age. Post-menstrual age, the PMA, 36 weeks PMA, according to gestational records, we assess at that time. So, there are three varieties which are categorized. You need to understand that diagnose any newborn, premature, who requires 28 days or longer oxygen is defined as BPD, right? But whether it is mild, moderate or severe will be assessed only when the child reaches a post-menstrual age of 36 weeks. And how do we define it? First is mild BPD. Mild BPD is said to be there if the child does not require any oxygen now at 36 weeks of post-menstrual age. Pehle the child required 28 days ka oxygen. So label you put BPD. But now no need for oxygen at 36 weeks post-menstrual age, you say mild BPD. So no oxygen requirement. at 36 weeks postmenstrual age. That is mild BPD, right? Second is moderate BPD. If the child requires oxygen with a concentration of 21 to 30% now also, then we will say moderate BPD. And third is severe BPD. If at 36 weeks of postmenstrual age, child requires oxygen concentration more than 30% or there is a need for positive pressure ventilation, then we will say severe BPD is present in the patient. So it is a clinical diagnosis. How do you treat? Treatment and prevention is very controversial, difficult, and whatever I am discussing here is based upon what is given in Nelson 21st edition. So treatment of BPD. The things which have been found to be effective in therapy, Nelson clearly says the treatment is mainly supportive, and with supportive management, slowly some children may come out. But certain drugs have been found to be useful. The first drugs which have been found to be useful are diuretics. Diuretics like furosemide have been found to be effective. Plus, there is a role of fluid restriction in the child. You don't give over fluids to the baby. Secondly, bronchodilators have been found to be effective. They decrease the airway resistance and so improve oxygenation. For example, you can use salbutamol or you can use ipratropium bromide. Third category of drugs are corticosteroids. For example, dexamethasone can be given. And fourth, you need to use vasodilators or specifically arterial vasodilators. There are two pulmonary artery dilators, I'm using the word pulmonary arterial dilators, inhaled nitric oxide, written as INO, and phosphodiesterase inhibitors like sildenafil and vardenafil, they can be used. But treatment overall is supportive. All these drugs are given a trial of. Majority of patients, it is a very process and they require prolonged hospitalization. Can you prevent HMD? Yes. Can you prevent BPD? Yes, it can be prevented. So prevention requires, first of all, limit the use of ventilation only when it is needed and prefer CPAP. CPAP does not cause BPD. IPPV, SIMV, HFOV, they all cause damage. So you prefer CPAP wherever it is possible. Secondly, vitamin A supplementation. Studies have shown vitamin A supplementation in preterm newborns to decrease the chances. Third, caffeine citrate. When caffeine citrate is given for apnea of prematurity, it also decreases as a good side effect. It also decreases the chances of BPD. And fourth is corticosteroids, especially if given in first 7 days of the ventilation. But corticosteroids use as a preventive therapy is controversial because prolonged corticosteroid use has also been associated with CNS problems like cerebral palsies. So we use again corticosteroids only when they are needed, only when treatment part is to be considered, not for prevention. And Nelson says it is a more of a clinical decision you have to take, a weighted decision that you have to take.